So often when we cover the news from Northern Ireland, it's about what's gone wrong, an act of violence, political deadlock. But actually, really a lot has changed since the Good Friday Agreement was signed. The city's been transformed. And that's what I wanted to show in this report from a part of Belfast that's now buzzing, but I remember as being pretty well derelict.
It was a very different place. People did not want to come out at night.
Willie Jack bought the Duke of York back in 1985 in the area which is now known as the Cathedral Quarter. His pub was one of only two landmarks here, along with St Anne's Cathedral, which gives the area its name.
It was scary. It had been an old commercial area. Buildings had been bombed and some rebuilt and some old buildings destroyed forever. And an awful lot of people went home at 4 o'clock, the few people that worked in town. It was very different days. It was everybody hurried home.
How many bars have you got in this place?
Well, it's a bit of a maze, and we're about to walk through to a beautiful bar called the Orifice. It was a ballroom of romance.
Now Willie has 4 thriving pubs, and his success is a sign of the change in the economy since 1998.
It didn't happen overnight. There was about 10 years where the two communities were suspicious of each other.
So what's changed?
People have been confident, more confidence, less suspicious of other people. It's a generational thing. As people go on, they don't realise that the community, they've 2 heads, 4 fingers, their eyes aren't close together. It's changed in people's perception.
And that confidence and trust meant that other businesses gradually came to the area as well.
My name's Damien Corr and I'm the manager of Cathedral Quarter Business Improvement District.
There's real character, isn't there? There's a little cobbled alleyway that we're walking down.
This was all warehousing back in the day. It's a very narrow street. You can see the old warehouses. Before the agreement, this would have been a seedy part of town. There was real danger of injury. Buildings were getting blown up, people were getting shot, and even, riots breaking out at the drop of a hat. It was a dark and dismal place. Rents would have been very low if you could attract rent at all. So as usual, all the arts organisations drifted towards here, and they're still, thank God, they've stayed and they've made the area what it is.
The arts sector has done what artists do around the world. They go into poor neighbourhoods that have, low rents and fairly rubbish buildings, and they bring them alive.
Anne McReynolds is the Chief Executive of the Metropolitan Arts Centre in the Cathedral Quarter. The MAC, as it's called, came here 11 years ago and is now one of the main cultural centres in Belfast. There's a mix of theatres and galleries.
Before the MAC, there weren't contemporary art gallery spaces of size and scale and ambition that could accommodate really world-renowned artists, the kind of artists that we have shown here, including Warhol, Hockney, Ellis Lowry, Ron Muick, the kind of artists that before the MAC opened, people who wanted to see that work got on a plane and flew to London or Milan or Paris.
If they could afford it.
Only if they could afford it. Now these exhibitions and the work of these artists is available to enjoy for everyone in the centre of Belfast.
You're obviously very proud of what the MAC does, but in a sense it's a microcosm for what's been happening right across Northern Ireland with the arts, with the creative industries.
That's absolutely right. About 20 years ago, there simply wasn't government funding to support the kinds of projects we see day and daily now with HBO, Universal, Netflix, massive budget films being made here. Game of Thrones, of course, kicked off 14 years ago, the largest TV show in the world. Michael Fassbender has just left town after having made a movie about a Belfast rap group who rap in Irish, and the band is called Kneecap.
That's very dark humour, isn't it?
And as you know, that's the Belfast, that's Northern Irish humour.
You've had quite a few stars here over the years.
Yes. Meryl Streep came to launch our capital fundraising campaign way back whenever she was filming Mamma Mia in London. And so when I picked her up, I said to her, for your speech, you must say that the MAC team is glad to have you, but they're really disappointed because Jimmy Nesbitt was due to launch the MAC's capital fundraising campaign, but he can't make it because he's opening a supermarket in Limavady.
I love that.
And she did.
It's not all been a Hollywood fairy tale. The pandemic and the political deadlock in Stormont have caused stumbling blocks. But there's optimism here. that the Cathedral Quarter will continue to grow.
We're in a new era now. We've got confidence, we've got peace, we've got trust, and people are flocking here. They're voting with their feet. I mean, this was a very scary street. Halfway up it is a Michelin-starred restaurant, and it's one of 3 that we have just in our wee area of Belfast. Round that corner, there's a 5-star hotel where all of the very famous actors who are filming all over Northern Ireland these days come to stay. So before the day's out, you never know who we might bump into.
And where's all this investment coming from?
It's coming mostly from the private sector, passionate, innovative people who have recognised this area's potential all those years ago. And then, after the agreement was signed,
the Good Friday Agreement, Belfast Agreement,
was signed, give the confidence to put their money where their mouth is. This place is just heading in one direction, and the genesis of that goes right back to the agreement, in my opinion.
The success of the Cathedral Quarter is echoed in other places right throughout Northern Ireland. You see so many buildings with walls made almost entirely of glass. In the bad old days, that would have been far too tempting for the bombers. Of course, there are still lots of problems here. There's real deprivation, huge issues with public services, dissident Republican violence, crime by loyalist gangs. But it's true to say that so much of Belfast really has been transformed in the past 25 years.